Did you ever do a personality test and the result actually described you pretty well? Or did you read a description of your zodiac sign and it actually fitted quite well? In that case, you most likely encountered the Barnum Effect. And today we'll find out how that works. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today I'd like to present to you the Barnum Effect. The year is 1948. We are students at university and the lecturer is one Bertram, a psychologist. And he wants to do a little experiment with us. He says he's got a personality test and he wants to figure out how good it actually works. So each of us receives a questionnaire with some personal questions and we diligently fill it out. And next week, as promised, each of us gets a personality sketch based on the results of the test. And we read those sketches and Fora asks us to rate how well that sketch describes our personality, how well this test worked. And we are quite confident. We give the test on average 4.26 on a scale from 0 to 5. So we attest an accuracy of more than 80%. We are in for a surprise though, because Fora reveals that we didn't actually get personalized sketches. We each received the very same description, the very same text. The experiment was repeated numerous times afterwards and it worked again and again. The results were always rated, always received a rating of more than 4 on the scale from 0 to 5. So how does this work? The Barnum Effect, I would say, consists of two things. On one hand, we have the fallacy, an instance where our mind leads us astray, because we tend to unquestioningly accept those vague and general statements about ourselves. We just fill in the gaps and then we say, oh well, yeah, that fits me quite well. To be precise, I think it is actually a mixture of different biases and fallacies. For example, the self-serving bias is relevant here. So is the confirmation bias. We will learn about those in future videos. So it is actually a mix of different biases and fallacies that makes us believe those vague general statements. And on the other hand, we have those statements. Because there are certain tricks, certain methods on how to phrase those statements so they tend to trigger the Barnum effect, so they tend to be believed unquestioningly. This can be done, for example, by referring to general fears or desires that are so common that basically everybody has them. Statements like, you tend to be self-critical, or security is very important for you. They apply to pretty much everybody. But we still perceive them as individual and as statements specifically about ourselves. I think this is probably an occurrence of what Daniel Kahneman calls visiati in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. Visiati, for what you see is all there is. It describes the tendency of our automatic unconscious thinking to only take into account that which is known, which is right in front of us, which is visible in this moment and to ignore the fact that there might be further information that might also be relevant but is not known at this moment. So in this instance, for example, we see a general statement about ourselves and we just say, does this apply to me? Oh yes, it does. Everything is fine. We don't ask, but doesn't it also apply to everybody else? This doesn't come to our minds. Furthermore, positive statements are especially easily believed, obviously. Statements like, you have a lot of unused potential. Who would say no to that? It sounds so good. But we also believe negative statements, especially if we believe that they come from an expert. So for example, if we do a personality test and we believe that it is scientifically sound, then we will also accept negative statements. Or if we believe in astrology and we read a horoscope that has been written by an astrologer, we will also accept negative statements. One very important aspect is that the statements leave a lot of room for interpretation. So we can fill in the gaps and make the statement fit to ourselves. That's why so many of those statements include phrases like sometimes, you might, you tend to, you sometimes do, whatever. Also, a good example in this regard is the phrase, you tend to avoid big risks. This phrase is accepted by people who are cautious and risk averse, but it is also accepted by people who like to take risks. Because both groups interpret the phrase big risks in different ways, in the end everybody says, oh well, a big risk is a risk that is so big that I don't want to take it, which pretty much makes the statement automatically true. This works so well because we are always looking for confirmation, we are always seeking for confirmation. For example, if I say to you, you tend to let yourselves go sometimes, then you will search in your memories for an example that makes this statement true, for confirmation of this statement. And you will always find one, sometime, somewhere, so you will accept the statement. If the statement would be much more specific, like you didn't get a lot done this week, then it wouldn't work, because you would find proof of the contrary. You would say, but I did a lot of work the day before yesterday. So room for interpretation is essential. It also helps that these statements aren't outright lies. They are correct. They are just so trivial that they are totally worthless. An example I like especially is that often contradictory statements are presented together in combination, such as, you sometimes are very withdrawn and introvert, but sometimes you also go out of yourself and like to meet new people. So this claims that you are both introvert and extrovert, and since very few people are total extremes, very few people are only introvert or only extrovert, most people are somewhere in between, so this statement pretty much works for almost everybody. I think what is also important about those statements is that they are so comfortable and easy and effortless. As Daniel Kahneman described in Thinking Fast and Slow, we don't like to employ our conscious, analytical and focused thinking because it is effortful and tiring, and we are relieved if we don't have to do it. And these vague general statements, they don't include anything we stumble upon. They don't include anything that makes us say, wait a moment, I have to think about that. And we like things being so easy. The Barnum Effect is universal, by the way. For example, in 2009, Paul Rogers and Jenny Soul did a study where they presented Westerners with presumably Western horoscopes and Chinese people with presumable Chinese horoscopes, and both believed the statements to a similar degree, so the effect is not cultural specific or anything, but it is universal. One important question remains here. If this guy Forer did the experiment, why is it called Barnum Effect, and who is Barnum? Phineas Taylor Barnum is a famous historical figure. Among other things, he was a circus director and a politician. He frequently appeared in pop culture. There were a couple of movies about him. Most recently, in 2017, the movie The Greatest Showman, that was about Barnum. And earlier in his career, he had a museum of curiosities. And he advertised this museum with the phrase, "a little something for everybody." You will always find something that you like, that fits your needs. And this phrase, "a little something for everybody," was referred to by one Donald Patterson in an essay where he used it to describe weak personality tests, weak psychological tests. He said about them that they produce personality descriptions after the manner of P.T. Barnum, descriptions that are so vague that they apply to everybody. And this was again picked up by another scientist, Paul Mehl, who referred to it in his own article, and he said that the phrase Barnum Effect should be adopted to describe and stigmatize such psychological tests that only seem to create results because the results are so trivial that they apply to everybody. And this worked out, the term sticked, and today it is usually referred to as Barnum Effect. Sometimes you will also see the phrase Forer Effect, but Barnum Effect is much more common. In relation to the Barnum Effect, you might also stumble upon the terms subjective validation or personal validation fallacy, personal validation effect. As I said before, the Barnum Effect is pretty much a combination of different biases and fallacies, and one that is important here is this personal validation fallacy. It states that we tend to believe things if they have a personal relevance for us. For example, we will perceive connections even if there actually are none, if we believe there should be connections. Another term that might come up is verification phenomenon. This is something that preceded the Barnum Effect. This is a term used in earlier research. The Barnum Effect appears frequently in everyday life. It is what keeps superstitions like astrology, graphology, fortune-telling, and others alive. Speaking about fortune-telling, fortune-tellers, mentalists, magicians, and others, also salespeople sometimes, apply a method called cold reading. This is where the fortune-teller, for example, interviews someone from the audience, some participant, some customer office, and in this interview he appears to know a lot about this person, and then he's able to state, oh yeah, I can read your mind, or I receive messages from the spirit world, from your dead ancestors or whoever, and This is done by using general statements, specific questions, things like that. So there is a range of methods used in cold reading, but Barnum statements are among them. Furthermore, the Barnum effect is also the reason that personality tests that aren't really scientifically sound, that are rather questionable, that don't produce any real practical results, such as DISC, Insights, MBTI, and many more, are still used today, are still successfully sold frequently because of the Barnum effect. As Rolf Dobelli points out, the Barnum effect also appears in a business context. For example, if you read an analysis of certain shares, you might encounter Barnum statements. And they might also appear in a sales talk or in business reports. So you will frequently encounter this kind of statements in day-to-day life. Unfortunately, as for other biases and fallacies, knowing about the Barnum effect doesn't mean that it will stop occurring for you. You will still find those vague general statements as a good fit to yourself. Someone who believes in astrology won't stop believing because he learns about the Barnum effect, and some HR manager who bought DISC or MBTI or whatever won't stop using the method because he learns about the Barnum effect. But nonetheless, I always hope there are a few who are protected from charlatanry, from questionable methods due to knowledge of the Barnum effect. So I think it is quite helpful and valuable if a lot of people know about the Barnum effect and understand how it works. By the way, are you disciplined and self-controlled on the outside, but tend to be insecure inside? Do you have a need for other people to like and admire you, but you're also self-critical? Do you pride yourself as an independent thinker who doesn't accept other statements without satisfactory proof? In this case, you've come to the right place. It's best if you like the video and subscribe to the channel right away, and maybe also write a comment. I'm looking forward to your feedback. We will see each other again next week in the book review of Erfülltes Leben, Literally Fulfilled Life by Friedemann Schulz von Thun. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.